Bits and Bones, my name is Slady V, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the iconic and critically acclaimed horror movie, The Babadook. Now, I've been saving The Babadook for some time. I knew that it was a movie that would get me thinking, and sometimes I'm just not in the mood for that. When your brain has had a long day of trying to make mediocre content and constantly overthinking your failures before they even happen, you don't want to curl up with something that's too stimulating. So, The Babadook is a horror thriller that came out in 2014 in Australia, starring Essie Davis and Noah Wiseman. And if you've heard of The Babadook before, you're probably not going to be surprised by the score that it has on Rotten Tomatoes. It is pretty astounding that 6 years after its release, it's still holding on so strong. Movie critics, left, right, and center, have made videos and praise about The Babadook, and watching it was kind of a move that required I have to do the same. So here we are. In case you haven't heard of The Babadook, I should probably give you a summary before I get too ahead of myself. The Babadook is about a single mother named Amelia struggling with the loss of her husband, who died in a car crash the same day that her son Samuel was born. As Amelia's life seems to be turning into a depressing spiral as Samuel is getting more and more out of control with his behaviors, she finds a book on his bookshelf called The Babadook. And The Babadook, as a book, is about a creepy shadow man that's going to stalk you and worm his way inside your head. That is just about all of the non-spoilers that I can give, because the story and the message are so intertwined. If you want to watch The Babadook, and it hasn't been spoiled for you already by the internet, then I recommend going and seeing it, because it is a bit of a wild ride, and I think it's something that everybody should probably experience at some point. It's a movie about a stressed out mother and a spooky entity haunting her and her son. So go check it out if that sounds up your alley. So I know that a lot of people do, but right off the bat, I want to come out and I want to say that I don't think that The Babadook is a masterpiece. I think it was really good and super weird and fairly unsettling, but I think that it got many high ratings because it's one of those movies that you appreciate more and more over time. The Babadook is one of those movies that if you get to the end of it and let the idea roll around in your head, you start replaying what you saw backwards to see how well the conclusion is supported by the events and go, that was fucking woke. And that's in no way a diss towards the ending of The Babadook. I loved the idea behind it. The Babadook, as a dangerous entity growing in the house of Amelia and Samuel, becomes a representation of the absent father figure. It becomes something that isolates them from others, both socially and physically. Socially, no one wants to be around them because it's awkward. Physically, they feel a bit repulsed by their status of deterioration, and vice versa, because Amelia doesn't want to be around other mothers who pity her, and Samuel physically acts out when confronted with his role as a fatherless child. Babadook got such high praise because its metaphors are so present, and it builds towards them throughout several aspects of the characters' lives. I found it as a bit of a satisfying sweetness in the ending solution, that their willingness to confront the absence of the father and how it negatively affects their life is the only way to take power away from it. The Babadook doesn't die, it's just weakened, and is something that they have to constantly maintain, akin to their own mental health about the whole situation. Or at least that's the message that I took away from it. The Babadook has many different interpretations by many different critics and reviewers. That's just the message I got. I didn't watch other analysis videos of The Babadook in case of spoilers in the first place, and I didn't want to ruin it for myself. I wanted to do the thinking for myself, and people just constantly recommended it in a general praise, so that's why I watched it in the first place. I think that the first half of the movie was brilliantly paced. It felt way longer than it was. There was so much suspense and so much tension. And I don't just mean in regards of dealing with the Babadook. I mean tension between Amelia and Samuel. The grinding social interactions that they go through. How intolerable and wearing Samuel's fucking scream is. God. It gives me a headache just thinking about having to deal with that as a single parent. As anyone. Like, I'm not into kids. Just living through Amelia's regular, everyday life set me so on edge. Where I think the movie lost a bit of its appeal for me, I'm not sure about everybody else, but wasn't when they were basically under the house arrested by the Babadook. Which is kind of weird to say because it is portrayed in some aspects as a physical entity, but really it's a mental monster. And if you're someone that needs that line drawn, is it real or is it not real, you're not going to enjoy the climax very much. And I'm kind of like that to a certain point. I wish that I could clearly pick out which parts in their confrontation with the Babadook actually translated to something that could make sense without it. Like a mother strangling her son because she clearly has PTSD or postpartum depression makes sense. That's something real. Samuel stabbing her because she's literally possessed by a demon doesn't exactly translate the same way. Yes, he is getting attacked by her because of those unseen mental real reasons, but as much as we want to see it, the movie as the movie is shown, in his head and in her head, it is still actually a physical possessing entity. So the line's a little blurry. And I'm not sure that me explaining that will make a whole lot of sense if you haven't seen The Babadook, so I'm sorry. But anyway, The Babadook as a movie, not as the monster. Oh, it gets hard when it's called the same thing. Anyway, The Babadook went hard on needing the characters to own up to their issues. They go through iterations of the Babadook, which I have to assume represents all the different ways being a fatherless family has affected them. First, it's a monster that's invisible and can scare you into seizures. It's an entity that can leave creepy messages. It can make you see shit on the TV from sleep deprivation. It can throw you around physically. It can possess you and get thrown up as black goo. It can turn into your husband and demand a sacrificial killing. And become your husband so you can watch him die all over again. Then shrinking away to the basement and live there as a house pet. It's a lot. The Babadook, he's a lot. And for me, because it kept morphing and it was like this weird extended fight scene that traveled across rooms of the house, from the basement to the bedroom to the kitchen to the basement again, back to the bedroom, back to the basement. I just kind of felt like they could have cleaned it up a little bit, maybe not done that many different kinds of coping, stuck to one, make it very strong, and not overload its metaphors, symbolism versus reality with all of this continued dealing. I get that this thing metaphorically can fill an empty house and their lives, but I feel like it should have cut back because it made me start to lose interest. They're fighting this creature imposing on their mental health, and after the first couple of rounds, it becomes very clear that what's happening is a metaphor, so you don't really assume that they're going to lose, unless in the case of Amelia trying to strangle her son. Because what good would a movie be if they didn't overcome this in the end? Then the metaphor doesn't really work, because it's not about overcoming, it's just about the depressing heaviness of the metaphor, which is the absent father and the broken family. Which happens. I mean, like, I wouldn't hate seeing a movie that just ended like that, but I don't think that it would have been nearly as critically acclaimed or enjoyed by so many people if they decided to just take that darker note. It was scary and terrifying watching Amelia slip into some, like, crazy state of honestly justified postpartum wanting to kill Samuel because he was ruining her life. But watching them fight its manifestation, the Babadook's manifestation physically, was pretty lacking in comparison to the metaphorical mental health that they're actually going for. Like I said, it's a movie that gets better the more that you think about it, but actually watching it was a bit of a letdown in some parts because of that physicality that you're watching that you know isn't really real. To be fair, the character design of the Babadook itself is iconic and, like, totally haunts your dreams afterwards. So be prepared for that. I'm giving the Babadook 4 out of 5 stars. It was entirely above average. It just didn't hit the mark for me specifically. It could have got a 4.5 stars, but because I found myself bored in some parts and the metaphor not quite lining up between the physical and the metaphorical, I couldn't give it much higher than that. Because I am someone that's a little picky and I want things and comparisons for those sorts of messages. Overall, I really did like the regular aspect of it. The fact, like, the struggling family, how to cope with it, the ways that they reacted with each other and the people around them. What took away from it most, and, like, spoiler for the ultimate ending here, is the fact that the Babadook, like I said, can't stay as one or the other. Its last iteration becomes a sort of invisible house pet that they keep and have to recognize and nourish but cannot destroy. That in and of itself makes sense as a metaphor into physicality. What doesn't quite make sense is actually watching them physically interact with it. They feed it worms, and it's like, if it's not really real, then do you actually even have to feed it anything? Or could you just give it affection? It physically actually eats worms, and that's where I kind of get, what? You're a metaphorical beast, okay? Just calm down. Stop taking up real world space. So yeah, those were some of the thoughts that I had about the Babadook. There's like hundreds and hundreds of other reviews out there if you want a different take or on what it all really meant. I think I got pretty close, but I'm not sure, and I'll go look it up on somebody else's afterwards. If you like my reviews and you would like to support any of my kinds of content, I have my Patreon linked in the description below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee account. I really appreciate any interaction that you give these videos, be it a like or a comment. I really love having conversations and talking about concepts and media. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.